So Joe is a friend who's been in the Quaker meeting for a long time. She lives in Alaska. This is just a little bit of a clip of one of her shows.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
How fascinating. It makes me want to actually be there and experience them in 3 dimensions because they're so dimensional.
Yeah, absolutely. So she lives in Alaska and she teaches in both Alaska and in Rome. So that was the piece. And at the end, I'll show you some of her paintings and her poetry, or a very short clip of that. But since Tom needs to leave, I'm going to turn this over to Sarah. And
Okay, now Cheryl.
don't worry, this is going to work just fine. So I'm going to make Sarah our co-host. And she's going to share some of her work.
She will once she remembers how to find it.
Yeah. So she's going to click on her desktop.
Okay, wait a minute. So I have to make this smaller, right?
Yep.
I should have practiced this. Cheryl?
Yeah.
Do I leave the meeting?
No, just do exit full screen in the right-hand corner of your screen. Click where it says exit full screen.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And then I go to the desktop. Okay.
And you should be able to see your desktop.
Yeah, now I see it. Okay.
And then you can click share screen and open up your pictures.
Okay, I have the pictures now. Wait a minute.
Okay. Then click the little green button at the bottom that says share screen.
No, it's not working. Wait a minute. This is just absolutely typical. I'm so sorry, everybody.
We have plenty of patience.
We have lots of.
I'm going to start again. Okay. So I hit this, but do I hit share screen first?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Okay, share screen. Now I hit this. Okay. All right. Now. All right. Where are we here? Share.
Okay. Yep. Great. Okay, there it is.
Oh, good.
Sarah Ashe.
Okay. So now, is that big? Do you see that full screen, or what?
If you, maybe the best way is for you to click on the ones on the left-hand side. Go back and.
I just did that.
I think if you click the green button in the top left corner, that will go full screen.
Good. Ah.
Yeah, go win.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So I thought I'd start by showing you my studio, which is a total pigsty, but I figured that would be good for you to see. Tom and I built this building in the back of our house, or it's a separate building, but it's at the back of our property. And I have the upstairs and he has the bottom for his wood turning. And so this is really the way it looks right this minute. Total mess. This is a calendar that I'm working on. I try to make a picture on there every single day, and I've been doing it since the middle of March, or a comment or something, just to sort of keep a record. And I have it all rolled up, so I can't remember what the beginning was like, but for some point I'll run out of paper and I'll stop. I have to admit it's getting a bit boring. And then okay, let me go on to the next piece. Whoop. Okay. I wanted you to see, well, first I'll show you this and I'll come back. This is one of my lights that I make, and I wanted just to show you sort of a bit about the process. Um, this lamp is probably, what did I decide? Maybe 26 inches tall, maybe 24, something like that. I use soapstone at the bottom. This is plumber's pipe here. I buy some fittings from a company online, and then this here is reed, and then I attach what might have been called rice paper at one point, but it now has much more sophisticated names. This is kozo, Japanese kozo paper. This is a sample of a light in progress. I soak this reed, which is a round reed that is used in basket making, and I create a form. If you can see this little thing right here, this is a piece that you see at the top of a lampshade, and it fits onto the harp, which holds the lampshade onto the lamp. And I attach everything onto this piece. I usually wrap it in a special paper so that things will stick, and then I actually tie down the reed once I've decided that I have a form I like. But I create the sculptures in a sense, and these little clips are used in electronics. They're alligator clips, and they're very, very useful because they're like little, well, they're little clips, and they hold things together, and then I can move them around, or I can take the whole thing apart and start all over again if I don't like it. So that's the process. Please interrupt me if you have any questions. So here's a sample of a light. And this one is called, what did I call this one? Into the Wind. I've done a number of sort of sail themed lights. This one is one of my chicken lights. I very much enjoy making chicken lights. They're really, they're a lot of fun. They're a little bit hard because usually the shape is hard to get, but when they work, they're very, I find them very joyful. And this was a very early light that I made. As you can see, it has a wooden base, and in the olden days, Tom would turn the bases, and then I would use those, and they were very, very beautiful. But I ran into problems because it's solid wood, and they sometimes would crack because the wood wasn't necessarily dry. And then people would be very, very upset. So over time, I realized that probably better to use stone. And I thought I was using Vermont soapstone, but I discovered that they're actually importing it, which I'm embarrassed about, but anyway. So this is another pod light. And here is yet another one. How am I doing on time? Yeah, okay. Am I going too fast or slow or?
You're just perfect. You're just
It's
perfect.
ideal.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so out of doing these lights, I developed, I was basically calling them light sculptures. And after Katrina, we had a chance to have a residency out in Aspen. And I went out there not knowing what I was going to do. And I ended up making what I called a caravan, which represented New Orleans because, the hurricane and the rebuilding of New Orleans. But I learned at that point how to make sculptures using this technique that were not lights. And so in the last years, I've been very interested and concerned about the refugee situation. And so this is one of several sculptures that I made that has to do with refugees. And some driftwood I put together. And again, the same structure as I use in the lights. And I just filled this with a variety of different pieces that might represent human beings that would be in this boat. This one, again, another refugee piece. And this one I call Hold Us. It's small. It's about 8 by 5 by 4. And one of the things that I discovered along the way, I took a course in encaustics, which is wax, working with wax in painting and also in this case, sculpture. And these are tea bags that I've rolled up and then tied and then dipped in wax. And they make a wonderful form, human form, I thought, and very simple, obviously. And so those will appear in a variety of my pieces. Obviously a glove and so forth. This piece is called Heading North. It's about 32 inches long by 8 by 7, so it's pretty long but narrow. And I was thinking about the people coming out of Latin America through Mexico and coming across our border or trying. This was before our president was doing what he's doing. But if I think I can make this bigger. Can I make this bigger? Let's see. Is it possible to make this bigger? Does anybody know? I wanted to show you that, well, I can't. These pieces here are water bottles that the people are carrying. And they're really just beads, but they look so much like, you know, a gallon milk jug that I thought they would make a very nice water bottle. And this piece is called In Danger, Not Dangerous. And I think it pretty much speaks for itself, but women from the Middle East who are in a space where they have their clothes drying that they've washed, and they're just waiting and sitting and hoping to be rescued or saved or helped in some capacity. And this piece is a boat called Life Raft. And this was inspired by a picture that I saw, well, many pictures over the years of people in rafts. And in this case, these people were coming out of, I think, Libya, and this beautiful black skin in orange life jackets. And it was, you know, a very dramatic visual picture for me. At the same time, just horrible, because of course they're in an inflatable raft, which is not at all safe, etc. But anyway, that's where this idea came from.
This is an incredible series, Sarah.
Yeah, well, this is just a bit of the series. And this piece actually usually hangs on a wall, but it's obviously an encampment with tents, barbed wire fence, a little bit of laundry. And I was just, I've just spent a great deal of time thinking about this and working on images that pertain to what's been going on and is still going on and probably will go on long after I'm gone. It's just awful what's happening. But anyway.
These are very moving, Sarah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And this one is called No Refuge. And you can see our wonderful country here, which I isolated with a barbed wire fence. And here's the wall. And here's the Statue of Liberty. And then we have all these refugee boats that are trying to get there, but are not going to be let in because it's totally blocked off. And I really did this, I think I did this after Trump started carrying on. But just so horrible. It's just so embarrassing and awful and terrible about how he's walled off our country from the rest of the world when it comes to helping people. So that's that one. Now we're going to move on to painting. I got involved in painting when I was in New Orleans. I took some oil painting classes. I actually was an art major in college, but I did ceramics, and I did some painting. But I decided when I was in New Orleans, there was a very traditional academy, and I took some drawing classes and some painting classes and learned things that Bennington College did not teach me. They were much more about the sort of abstract expressionist and do your thing. And the technical side of things was rather weak. So after I got involved with thinking about the refugees, I then started to do things in paint. And this is 18 by 24, and I'm calling it Seeking Safety. It's all of my paintings are a bit abstract, but you can see buildings, you can see people in the water, you can see fire. Again, thinking about probably most of my thoughts at this time were around the Middle East.
Sarah, what was the time period for that?
I'm sorry?
When did you do this piece?
I did this piece 2 years ago, maybe 2 to 3 years ago, I think. But you know, time is sort of elusive. I'm sorry. I could probably find out for sure, but I think I'll say 3 years just to be safe. This was done a bit later, and this is a smaller piece. This one is probably 9 by 11 or somewhere in that vicinity. And this was done on, this is a piece of plywood, and then I applied some gauze on top of it to create a texture. And then I painted on top of that. But I think it sort of speaks for itself along these lines. And then this one is probably 10 by 12. I call this one Blue Tarps, because the other thing that is very dramatic when you look at pictures of these these camps, really, what my picture of the tents is pretty pristine compared to what they really look like in many cases. And they're often have blue tarps covering them and so forth. And very often barbed wire fences. This one I call A Totem to Death. And this is the wall from my perspective. And people coming up to it, some sort of camps. I even put in the porta potties right here. People coming in, you know, the drying river and so forth. This is about 18 by 18. So I had a residency in the Vermont Studio Center a year ago. And while I was there, I suddenly realized that maybe I shouldn't be working on stretched canvas, but that maybe taking canvas and ripping it and sewing it together or gluing it together would be more in keeping with the kind of materials that people were actually living in. So I started a series of pieces. This is two-dimensional. It's, let's see, it's, sorry, I think it's 14 by 17, and it's sewn in places and so forth. And so it's basically the camps. And I only am showing you one example, but this is probably my paper I make my lamps out of that I glued on. I've painted some, and you know, just it's like a collage. And the other pieces in this line are very similar in the way I've put them together. And then this is recent. This has been done in the last months. I decided, I still was thinking about refugees, and I got the idea of birds. And this one, the wings are gauze, or yeah. And but what this brown is on here are tea bags. And I find that used tea bags make wonderful really work out beautifully when you attach them to things. And so I created sort of a feather-like structure using these stained tea bags. And I called this one, If Tents Were Wings.
Mm.
And I don't think you can see this very well. I wish I could make them bigger. I don't know why I can't. But anyway, I use for the feet of these birds things that I find on my walks. And they often are seed pods. These are some some kind of a seed pod that I found, and I sort of cut into it to make it more. And here is another one. This one is called Escape. And again, it's on the same vein. It's very much more three-dimensional with the figures in the boat, so to speak. And you can see some seed pod feet. And this is a piece of paper that I often use in lamp making. And then in the last three pieces that I have to show you, I got some slides of the virus, the fungoid virus, that were sort of in black and white, or and I decided that the patterns were so interesting that I did a few paintings using those patterns. And this was the first one that I did, and it's 8 by 12. And then there's another one, a little smaller, 8 by 10. And then this one. So that's pretty much what I've been up to. That's the end.
Wow.
Very, very nice.
Thank you.
Amazing, Sarah.
Incredible.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being a good audience. And I'm
I
sorry I
have-
couldn't make them bigger because it, I'd like you to be able to see up close, but I don't know how to do that.
It looks like Robert got out a magnifying glass. Did that work?
Oh, that, did it help?
It works beautifully.
Oh, good.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It took me much too long to get there, but once I got there, it was wonderful.
Well, do you want me to go back to anything? You want to look
I'd
up?
love for you to go through the entire show.
Well, I don't know. Cheryl, what's the time frame doing here?
That would be fun. We're going to say goodbye to Tom because he has to go to graduation.
Yeah.
Tom, have wonderful
Bye-bye.
graduation.
Bye.
Sir,
Bye.
thank you so much. That was just, I'm awed by the imaginative creativity. And now I'm going to pause over my tea bags before I throw them out, because they obviously had something in there that's calling me.
Beautiful.
Yes, there is. They're wonderful.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.
So I'll go backwards. But you,
Sarah, I have a question.
yeah,
It goes back to your lovely light sculptures, your lamps.
so I'll go back
And
to the very beginning, and then you can talk. Okay.
yeah, I have to say I spent a nice chunk of time with them in the real world today, because I was in Burlington and I walked through the Frog Hollow Gallery, where you have several lamps on display,
Right.
and I was so struck by them. They're really quite lovely. But
That's beautiful.
yeah, what I'm curious about is, I mean, you talked about your process, but what was your inspiration in them? What is it that first drew you to want to create these things with light? And is there an inspiration in the natural world, or is this entirely out of your imaginative world? Or tell us about where they emerge from.
Okay, it's a great question, and I probably should have put one of the things that led me to this, because it's a very bizarre beginning. When I lived in New Orleans, I had a studio, and I took some limes to my studio that I was going to draw, and I forgot about them. And when I went to, one day I was poking around, and there they were, and they were all dried out, and I couldn't bear to throw them out. So I cut them open, took the insides out, and made some very small sculptures, little vehicles and the like. About a year later, a friend of mine who lives up in Keene Valley, New York, called me up and said, you're coming up here. There's an interesting sounding workshop down in New York State. Do you want to go to it? And it was called Lights Out, where a woman was teaching how to make Noguchi Akari lights. And I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're very, very simple, beautiful lights that are made on a form and so forth. And at that moment, I thought, wow, maybe I could figure out a way to get light into these little limestone sculptures, which of course was a great thought, but not something that I ever have figured out how to do, nor did I ever do it. So I went to the workshop, and in the workshop, she taught us how to make the form on which Noguchi made a kind of form using mat board, no, not mat board, but that styrofoam filled board that you put on the back of paintings and things when you want to push them up into the frame. Anyway, so we made these forms, and then we, wet the reed, wrapped the reed, learned how to cut the paper and so forth. But what was very distressing to me was that once you made the form, every single thing you made was exactly that form. So I made a few of those, and it was so boring that I just thought, wow. But I loved the light, and I loved the shape. And my interest in college was sculpture and ceramics. So I had already a kind of a sense of three dimensions that I liked. I like form. So I decided, well, maybe I can make my own I don't need that inside structure. And so that's how I got started. And the first ones, as with many things, were pretty crude. I hadn't figured out yet about putting them on an actual lamp, and I was lighting them from underneath, and they sort of sat like a lantern on top of a fixture. But it was very scary because, of course, if they hit the light bulb, and in those days they were incandescent bulbs, would burn up. So over time, it didn't take very long before I realized if I could do it on a harp, I could keep the paper away from the heat. Every lamp has a chimney, so the heat goes up from the bottom through the top, so that they always are cool. And of course, with the fluorescent bulbs, and then ultimately the LCD that are cool, it makes a huge difference in my sense of comfort. But that's how I got started. And then I taught somebody how to make them, and then he discovered where to get these fittings, and so he shared that with me, and it's been a sort of an iterative back and forth. And then he went off in a whole other direction, and I've stayed pretty much with contained forms because that's what I like.
Lovely.
And I am inspired by things that I see. Either milkweed pods was an enormous inspiration for a long time, and still is.
That one, can you show us the one that looks like a milkweed pod a little further down? Yeah.
And so I've done a lot of ones, not even as, and then I discovered that things like this very long kind of tentacle, if you like, sometimes isn't terribly practical if you're really going to live with it. So I began to change the shape and shorten those and play around. And as with anything, some are much more successful than others. But I really, and then suddenly the chicken idea came to me, and so then I did a lot of chickens and. So, and sometimes, and I've done, in our house, we have several sconces. In fact, let me see if I move. Can you see behind me on the wall there?
Yeah.
That's a sconce. I could turn on the light and you might be able to see it better.
Wynn, are these similar to the way you make lanterns and kites?
Similar and different. So I will share some images of my lanterns and lamps sometime as well, and we can compare and contrast.
I'll just leave that.
Great,
You can't
thanks.
see it. The light is too bright. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I'd love to see. But mine I never can. It's very hard for me to make the same thing twice. because it's totally, it's organic. I don't have a form that I work off of. I just have my head and my drawings, and I doodle around and come up with ideas. But I have made them for individual people who have asked for certain kinds of sizes and feelings, and or they see something they like and say in that vein, and that I can do. I can't replicate. I've tried to replicate on occasion, but it never feels fresh to me. Okay.
Well, they're very lovely forms, and I love the spontaneity of them. It clearly feels like you're working in the moment.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to tell you about them that I do, and I don't know, I know I didn't learn this from Noguchi, from the Noguchi course, is I work with a non-yellowing glue, and I water it down, and after the lamp is done, I spray it with that water, and it shrinks the paper a little more, which allows the ribs to stick out. But more importantly, or as important, it also seals the paper so that they don't collect dust, and you can damp sponge them off with. And, so I found that makes them a little bit better to have around. Otherwise, they just absorb all the dirt, and in my house, that would be a lot.
Sarah, how long have you done the lamps for?
What?
For how long a period of time have you done the lamps?
Oh, I think it's been 12. Let's see. I probably started in 08, maybe. Well, wait. When was Katrina? 7? No, it must have been before that. I'm sorry. It must have been 05. I guess, because I already had that technique down when we went for that residency. So, okay, Robert, I'm just doing this, Robert, so you can take a look.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering, Sarah,
I want to take a look too.
have you done an exhibit of all of these refugee boats together somewhere?
I did. I had an exhibit at the Sheldon
Uh-huh.
a few years ago. And then I showed, not all of them, but I showed a number of them down at a show in Boston in not a school, but a place where therapists meet or were together. And there was a woman there was putting on a show. So I sent 4 or 5 of them down there. And then I showed them last year in Rutland. There was an exhibit for Vermont artists who were over 70 or 70 and over. And I qualified quite easily. And so I had a number of my pieces there. I know I had this one was there. But actually I've sold a number of them. This one got sold in that environment, which was interesting. I was surprised. Okay.
Besides doing the bases to some of your lamps, do you and Tom sometimes do other works together?
Collaborations?
Yeah.
We haven't really done a lot. Tom is helpful on the bases. I actually was doing the bases, the stone bases myself, but now he very kindly is doing, he does the drilling, because Tom, you may not know this, but Tom is extremely precise, and he doesn't, he's not sloppy. He very, measured when he does things. I, on the other hand, am likely to drill the hole askew, and therefore the thing doesn't straight up and down. So I'm very happy to have him help me on that. It really makes a huge difference in terms of the professional quality. But we haven't done a lot together. We've shown together because our work complements each other in some ways, but not really.
These are very inspiring, Sarah. I
Oh.
wish I had been able to see the show in Rutland at least. I didn't do much last year.
Yeah. Well, if ever it's possible to go into people's spaces again in my lifetime, you're always welcome to my studio. And I don't have a picture of my Katrina caravan, but to me, that's still one of my favorite pieces I've ever done. But it's 10 feet long, so it's very difficult to photograph in its entirety. But I have that, and I have some of these pieces in my studio. The lamps you can see at Edgewater, and as you know, and at Frog Hollow.
I've seen I've seen some of your lamps here and there. I did not know that you did them, but my
Okay.
daughter and I admired them profusely.
Oh, good. Well,
Because
thank
we
you.
like we're very fond of natural shapes, and seed pods are fascinating to us.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, I'm glad.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sarah. One of your last pieces on the COVID, I
Yeah.
think it was 8 by 12. It seemed like the colors were really bright.
Right.
And then the COVID cells or whatever they are, they were there too. And I just wonder how that's understood.
Why did I make them bright, or what?
Yeah, if it's COVID, you know, which everybody kind of wants to back away from, why are there beautiful colors around it?
Well, because when I looked at the slides, at the black and white pictures of the slides, I have to say it was absolutely beautiful.
Oh,
The shapes, the forms, the way it moved around. You know, it's horrible. I mean, the reality of it is absolutely horrible, but the physical way I saw it was very intriguing to me as a design, as a set of designs. So I really have, and the color has probably nothing to do with the virus, really. I just wanted to play with, I love color, so I was really playing with color probably in the context of that design.
thanks for explaining that. You know, why do artists have to explain anything?
No, well, it's a very good question. I mean, I even hesitated doing it, to be honest. You know, I thought, why am I even thinking of looking at this? But people kept sending me, a friend of mine made in ceramics, that classic picture of the cell, you know, with or maybe many cells with the little red thing sticking out. And that was not intriguing to me, but the way it moved together in the tissue was really quite beautiful.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
I have a real question about this. How do audiences relate to your work? Do they know what it is that you're doing by the title, or what is it? How do they understand the work about the immigrants?
Well, that's a very good question, and I have no idea how they know, if they know, or if they're even interested. I mean, that's the problem. Unless you're in a one-person show where people are coming specifically to see what you did. If, you know, in any of the group shows, if somebody chooses to talk to me, that I find out. But so often you don't know, you know, what you really have there's no way to get feedback. Unless you have a book or something that people can write in, if they're willing to do that. But
This is really beautiful. It looks like heaven or something. It's so gorgeous. Oh, wow, that one too. But I think that it's very brave to put it out there the way you see it, the way it comes out, the way you feel it, and you don't hide it anywhere, you know?
oh, well, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's really important for me. I have to, when I'm making any kind of work of art, I've got to have an emotional connection to it. It's got to have some meaning in my life, and social issues tend to be things that grab me, and so I've done still lives. I've done other kinds of painting, which I didn't show, but it isn't, I don't want to make a pretty picture. I want to make something that says something about what I'm feeling. And right now, very honestly, I'm struggling with the whole Black Lives movement and wondering if something is going to come of that. I'm in a study group on white fragility, and it's pretty tough going, and I hope I survive it. But anyway, it's, I would like to do, I'm sorry, Robert, I keep forgetting to move the along. I hope that something will happen that will allow me to find a way of putting into some artistic form some of my feelings about what all this is about. But I don't know yet, and nothing has happened that is artistically yet. Okay. Have you seen, oh no, you did. Did you see you've seen all these, Robert? I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
One more time.
I'm seeing them for the first time also. They're gorgeous. They're gorgeous.
Oh. Okay. You want me just to go back to the paintings? No, Robert is looking. Okay, that you didn't see that one.
Oh. Magnificent.
Really amazing. Really beautiful.
This one startles me in an unusual way because I recognized it immediately, and it has an unsettling feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you intended. That's my gut feeling. Having been through COVID,
Mm-hmm.
this expresses how it felt to me.
Wow. Well, I think this is the most successful of them, of the COVID ones. And I'm sort of feel like, why go any further? I don't need to explore this anymore. But one thing, I don't know if you can see it with your magnifying glass, but I had some tea bags or something that had little S's on them. So
I was going to ask you what the S's were. I've seen the logo, but I can't place it.
well, it was on some piece of rice paper that was on a tea bag. I think it was on a tea bag of some sort. I mean, this was something from India, I believe. And so I thought it was such perfect because I'd already put these little blue things around, and I thought, oh, I'll just stick those in. And since it has S, even better.
Isn't there script below the S? Looks like there's some kind of writing below the S.
On which one? This one, on all of them?
Correct. No, that one you just had the arrow on.
This.
3 letters below it.
Here?
Yes.
I don't think so. Because
Okay.
I don't think there's anything else that I glued on. Everything else is paint. Either covered or I may have, oh, I know what you may be seeing is I painted this over another painting.
Oh.
So if you look, you see this here? This
Yeah.
one's a refugee tent.
Oh.
So some of that's probably coming through. That's
I
probably
think.
what you see. And that's kind of fun, when you have something that you feel like it's not going anywhere, to just change gears totally and keep going. So I have some of that.
Looks like an evil face at the top left.
Right here?
Yes.
Yeah, it sure does. Well, it is evil. Horrible. Okay, and then there's this one, which, could be something else altogether, but.
Oh.
Wow, Sarah, thank you so much.
Well,
Great.
Cheryl, thanks for the opportunity, and thank you particularly for holding my hand and making the whole thing work, because without you, as you well know, it would be no show.
Well, it was It was amazing. Do people have other questions or thoughts for Sarah? I'll probably just close with a clip of Joe reading her poetry over her paintings.
I just think they're beautiful. That's all. They're so
Right.
lovely.
Now, if I,
Thank you, Sarah.
oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
coming.
I want to come to your studio.
Well, I want you to come.
I'll wear a
So,
mask and gloves, but let me in.
yeah, okay. Well, you know, you have my number. Give me a call and that probably can be arranged.
Okay, thank you.
I have a mask. I have
I
a hard.
enjoyed hearing, whoops.
I think mask would be good.
Sarah, thank you so very much.
You're
And
welcome.
Cheryl, thank you for arranging these. These are real treats for me. I feel